And we are live. What's up, Yang Gang? So today we're going to be talking to Al Womble, who I think he has started the New Frontier Initiative. And we're going to talk about why that's important and all that stuff. But we got a few items of housekeeping while we're waiting on him to get here. He's running a little bit late, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk in the meantime. I hope y'all are having an awesome new year. 2020 is over. It's done. Thank goodness. Man, what a year. Hopefully this year is going to be a lot better for all of us. But I want to say thank you to our Patreons and our donors. Y'all are so important to this channel, and we appreciate it very much. If you would like to support this channel, there are multiple ways to do so in the links below. Bling! Just click that little drop-down box. You'll see it all in there. And special shout out to our newest Patreon, David G. So that is awesome. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Happy birthday to Ching Jewel, who is going to be releasing her documentary on Andrew Yang tonight, 8 o'clock. So make sure that y'all tune in. That's going to be something to watch. I've been very fortunate I've been able to pre-screen it. So, man, it's pretty good. And it's so cool to see because, like, you see the Andrew Yang documentary that was released the other day about the cavalry. And then you see it from a different perspective with Ching's film. And it's just so awesome to see how much work that the Yang gang put into trying to get Andrew Yang elected. And if y'all saw that first documentary, first 5 minutes tore me up, man. I'm telling you what's the truth, y'all. I think that I came to tears more watching that documentary more times than I did watching Soul the other night, which was an awesome movie. Y'all haven't checked that out, make sure that you do so. But man, it just brought back all the emotions of the campaign. And it started out with the suspension of the campaign. And I remember that night, oh my gosh, if y'all, a lot of y'all that tune into this channel, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about because y'all have seen, sorry, I'm checking to see if a guest has arrived yet. Y'all saw the emotion that was in my face and my voice. And that's what's got me so frustrated about this mayoral run that he's talking about. Because I fear that that's going to make the earliest presidential run 2028. And that's America. We can't last that long. Poor people can't last that long. It's crazy. We need help now. And that's all over America. It's not just, in my backyard. That's everywhere. The broke folk vote is just getting more and more strapped. And if this pandemic has taught us anything, that the cavalry's not coming. It's up to us. And, who's going to be the next Andrew Yang? And that's something we all got to think about because it may be somebody that watches this channel that is the next Andrew Yang. Somebody has to step up in this country. If it's to be, it's up to me. Right? So where's the next Andrew Yang going to come from? And that's something that I'm going to touch on in a segment that we are going to be doing. I'm a special guest hosting for the Trickle Up, and we're going to be hosting on the Low. So make sure that y'all tune into that. It's going to be awesome. And I'm going to talk about that more in depth. And I think my guest has arrived. What? Hold on, y'all. Al, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How you doing?
Doing good. I might need to turn my volume up a little bit here. Okay. Now we're
gonna move myself here just a little bit so that that way people can actually see me.
All right, we get to take a look at the background while you're standing up.
All right, how we doing?
Doing good. I'm kind of fed up with dealing with contractors today. So, and you know what's crazy is like for some reason when we had talked earlier through the Facebook app or whatever Messenger, and you said something about 2 o'clock. For some reason that got stuck in my mind. And I'm sitting here at 2 o'clock in front of the camera in the studio, and I'm like, where is this guy? Oh my gosh, he's not here yet. And I'm stressing out. And then I realized that I'm an hour early.
Yep. Yeah. I'm in Central Time here, and you guys are on the East Coast, so that's all good. I think with Zoom, we all have to kind of start to adjust to certain realities. My thing about Zoom meetings is sometimes, you have to almost treat it like a seance. Is like, is anybody there? Is anybody trying to speak to us?
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, can anybody hear me? Yeah, so
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Al, and I was the former campaign chair for the Andrew Yang campaign here in the state of Iowa, and it was some of the most fun that I had ever had. Andrew is just a tremendous guy. When you talk about friendly, open, honest, somebody who sometimes, has that, I don't want to say childlike joy about him. He enjoys everywhere he goes. He enjoys everything that he's doing. The Yang Gang that we had here in Iowa was some of the best in the world. When we had our Yangapalooza here, it was a cold, drizzly day, but people were still excited. People were still pumped up. We had a massive crowd there. Right now, I'm the chair of the West Des Moines Democrats, and I'm chair of the Iowa Democratic Black Caucus, and I'm the state director for an organization called New Frontier Action. And we're working on things like, voting rights, disparities in education, economics, working on things like, honestly, also on making sure that people get those subsidies of $1,000 a month. Who knew that the perfect guy, to be able to handle us in this pandemic and crisis, who gave the perfect answer? People were originally like, nah, that sounds crazy. And now everybody's, just wanting those stimulus checks to be able to help them out.
I knew.
Yeah, so did I, Andrew, when it came to me working on Andrew's campaign, he didn't have a staff or anything like that call me. He called me himself personally, So when it's Andrew on the other end of the line, your ears prick up, and you just get a natural smile on your face, and so things start to look a little bit better from that day forward. But and the other things we're also looking at is policing. I actually just got done meeting with a police chief, talking about sometimes some of the excessiveness that happens with officers. But yeah, a lot of what we're doing is talking to people about that kind of, that equity in when it comes to economics. We've seen lately that unfortunately we've had record stock market prices, yet there are millions of people out there who are unemployed. There are millions of people right now who are either entering poverty or who are on the verge of poverty. And I think that there are so many of us that look at it and say, this is a crazy system. We have people making more money than they ever have before, but there are a lot of good, hard-working Americans out there doing everything they can to take care of them and their families. And unfortunately, what the stock market has told them is, well, too bad, we're doing great. So we love it here. And, that's something that has got to go. And I think that we've seen that, with this record unemployment, record cases of poverty, that, having something like, that $1,000 a month would be crucial to not only helping lots of people, but just us being able to hold on to our society. When you've got so many people that are going without food, possibly being evicted, that's going to create, issues in every category of life. So
Yeah, you know, you were talking about police chief. You met with a police chief. I met with a few police chiefs in my time too, but it was, it was never in a good way.
Yeah, yeah, no, he agreed to sit down with me and talk to me about, because no matter who you are, people don't know this about me, but I used to work in construction, and those of us who worked in construction didn't always have the best interactions with officers either. So sometimes when we talk about, police being excessive, we're not just talking about, certain minorities communities. We're talking about a lot of different people. We're talking about my construction brothers who are out there who would often get harassed, especially if they're going into some small town to, build a project. And then suddenly the officers are looking at them like they're an alien and they're there to, invade the town, drink all the liquor and, bust up all the bars. And maybe that occasionally did happen,
I've worked in construction most of my life, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've had interactions myself with police officers on job sites. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? We're here to work. We're not here to like do anything. We're like on a job site, and they'll literally roll up on the job site and start asking questions. And it's like, what are you doing, man?
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. And that's why, I work for New Frontier Action Fund now as a state director, because, we're trying to address a lot of those issues that Andrew talked about in his campaign. When we talk about the problems that people are facing, it's not always, an issue of whether you're one color or another. A lot of times it comes down to your economic status. Based on your economic status, a lot of times that's how people think your social value is in this country. Based on your economic status, that's how sometimes you get treated in this country. That's where your educational opportunities are in this country. And we've got to say that finally, that is absolutely enough. Especially with so many people being affected by COVID and how it's torn apart people's lives, we've got to say that that has to come to an end. And when you look at that, like Andrew talked about, that mindset of scarcity that people have, I'm willing to do anything to get mine because I'm so concerned that I'm not going to get any. And if you that, mindset of scarcity, that opens up whole new possibilities for people.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you touched on that, because this is something that we have encountered so much that, in the town where I was living in North Carolina, Union County is like, it's so awful. And we saw it so much and we were part of it. It's very much a caste system.
Yes.
Where it's the poor people are just being oppressed. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you're poor, they're harassing you because they will target you, and it sucks so bad because once they know that they can get you, it's like they try intentionally to get you again and again and again and again, and that's how they keep the system full.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. We do kind of have that, economic caste system here in the United States, which limits people's, abilities to get, proper education, proper health care, other economic opportunities. I mean, when you look at the fact that sometimes you're going to apply for a job and maybe you are the perfect candidate, but that particular employer also reviews your credit rating, use that as a disqualifier for you to be in that particular position. That's absolutely insane, and that's why, I'm so happy about where I work now with New Frontier Action Fund, because we are trying to combat those kind of things. We're trying to combat poverty. We're trying to combat, people not having proper access to, medical health or, access to a good education, and make the rest of the society understand that, listen, these same problems that these people are facing could one day be your problem too. Just because you're not facing it, you need to realize what's affecting them is going to affect you. And you need to understand that because we all live together in the same community. If you talk about like Iowa, some of the poor counties that are here and the problems that those individuals face, it does affect, other parts of the state as well. And that's why we need to come up with solutions that are going to help those folks. Come up with ways that we develop things like, broadband, better jobs, those kinds of things. So that once again, we're seeing, development across the spectrum and not just, like you said, within a certain economic caste system.
And what's so frustrating is in a lot of these towns, and Monroe, where I'm from, was one of them. And now I'm in a state where there is a lot of poverty. Um, Here in Vermont, you're either very well off or you're living in a house with a bunch of other people. That's just the
Hmm.
way it is.
Yeah.
And the powers that be in Washington don't understand how poverty leads to so many other things. Like there is a
Hmm.
very real opioid crisis.
Hmm.
We lost one of the Yang Gang just a few days ago, Juanito, to an opioid overdose.
Yeah.
And it's so heartbreaking because what happens is, people get in these situations and you're poor, and it's like you don't have any way out, you don't have any options, so you just want to escape. So
Hmm.
you maybe use a drug, and you get
Hmm.
started on opioids or something like that just to escape. And it
Hmm.
becomes this harsh reality that floods into so many other areas of people's lives. And like that's what's so frustrating when you hear someone like Andrew Yang come along and he's like, you know what, guys, man, we can virtually eliminate poverty in this country. All we got to
Hmm.
do is institute this thing called a freedom dividend and tax
Yep.
these rich ass companies that are paying zero in taxes, and we can help all these people. And when I heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast, I was like, this is such a revolutionary idea.
Hmm.
This would help so many areas. You would see
Hmm.
so many things in this country improve just from people having money. Money
Hmm.
solves a lot of problems.
Yeah, it does. I mean, when you talk about just things like, let's say, food insecurity, there's some people maybe say, oh, $1,000 and much that a month. That's not much, depending on where you live. I live in Des Moines, Iowa. $1,000 a month is probably going to go farther than it would in a place like New York. But at the same point in time, you look at how that might be able to help with food insecurity. If you're somebody who's barely scraping by to pay your rent, to pay for gas, to do all the other things you do, that $1,000 a month is going to make sure that you help keep your family fed. And therefore, that's going to free you up to be able to do other things rather than just constantly worrying about that or picking up another side hustle. You say you're in Vermont. I had a chance to visit Williston, Vermont a long time ago. That anywhere near where you're at?
Uh, Everything in Vermont is like, it doesn't matter which direction you go, you're the same distance from everything.
All right, brother. That sounds good. No, but yeah, it's one of those things where Andrew had a lot of ideas that I think they were so big, some people couldn't necessarily comprehend it. And when we talk about eliminating poverty and all the good that would do for the United States and all that good that would do for ourselves, our different citizens, especially in a time like right now, there are some people rather than living in desperation could say, "Well, I got a means and a way to go forward. I have a way that I can continue." And that's extremely important at a time like this. So for me, when we look at some of the concepts and especially when we talk about certain companies not paying anything in taxes, you're wanting the benefits of our police department, our fire department, our roads, our bridges, but you don't want to pay for any of it. That doesn't make any sense for me. That's like me wanting to join a gym and saying, okay, you and you are going to pay for it. I'm not going to pay for it, but I'm going to be the person that uses it the most. That doesn't make any sense to me. When we live in a place like this, those taxes, being able to tax some of those, internet companies or some of those tech companies, so they're properly paying into the system and then using that money to just straight give back to people, then we're going to see that we have a more equitable nation. Then we see people aren't struggling the way they are. And that bothers me because when I look at like some of our urban areas and some of our rural areas, doesn't matter where you look, they're affected by some of the same issues. There's a lack of job opportunities, which leads to a lack of tax base, which leads to a lack of funding for education, a lack of infrastructure development. And that's the same thing that you can say that happens in some of our, poorest rural areas and some of our poorest urban areas. So then how do we correct that type of situation? And I think, when I heard you earlier about who's going to be our next Andrew Yang, I think it's up to us. It's up to us as former Yang Gang people to look around and see who's out there, who's running, who's doing what, and how do we help say, hey, you know what? If you decide to run for office, we got your back. If you decide to run for office, here are some of the things we want to make sure that you stand for, that you champion. These are the things that Andrew talked about to us. And we realized, this is not a left thing. It's not a right thing. It's a forward thing. That was one of my favorite sayings from the Yang Gang. Other than that song Trickle Up that was written by that guy, Chef Zoot, I think his name was.
Yeah, that's my boy. I love Chef Zoot.
I had a chance to meet him in Des Moines, and I tell you what, I would listen to that song when I was like lifting weights and stuff. And so when I got a chance to meet him in person, I was like a little kid again. I'm like, you're Chef Zoot. Oh my gosh. I listen to you like every other day, man. So it was pretty
People
exciting.
don't realize that like I'm an OG Yang Gang, and that song was out like before I became Yang Gang. And it's crazy. Like, it's like you said, when I first heard about Andrew Yang, and I was like, holy shit, there's a song about this dude too. And then I would put it on in the car, dude, and I would just like, I would jam to it, and I would be like, man, we are gonna win this thing, dude.
Well, and that's one thing that I despite where we ended up, it doesn't, obviously I'm disappointed. But when I look at a couple different things, number one, the excitement that Andrew was able to just infect everybody with was tremendous. And then the other thing that I look at is that he put issues out there, and he was able to push certain things that were not being talked about before. And then there are some people who are saying, you know what, this guy's got a lot of great ideas. We need to listen to him. We need to make sure we pay attention to him. People like Biden and Cory Booker and others would pull him aside and talk to him. Because when I would come here to Iowa, or when Andrew would come here to Iowa, those other candidates would literally stop and grab Andrew to talk to him. So it proves to me that he had a lot of ideas that other people said, you know what, let me talk to you more about that. Let me learn more about that. And so maybe what we need to do, like, you were talking about, how do we find our next Andrew Yang? And then how do we as Yang Gang help support that person? How do we help make sure that person does have a shot? Because to me, a fight's never really over if you're willing to keep fighting. So.
For sure. And I think we're just getting started. And I do think that you're starting to see more and more people adopt Andrew Yang's policies. And we had a victory with Dr. Jermaine Johnson. And I mean, we're making waves, and it is so revolutionary because as I came from the conservative side, and I had always considered myself politically active, right? Kind of a F the system kind of guy, tired of both sides really, because in my head, both sides work for the same corporations and same lobbyists. It's all, and then this guy, Andrew Yang, comes along and he starts talking about a freedom dividend. And I had never heard of such a novel concept in my life. And I'm now 45 years old. But when I first heard about it, I was like, why are we not already doing this? It just seems to make so much sense as a human being. Like, it doesn't even, like, just get rid of everything else. I've been homeless before, and I wasn't homeless because I wanted to be homeless. I was homeless because I was forced through circumstances to be homeless. Some of the decisions I made, some of the decisions were forced upon me. Either which way it goes, I didn't want to be homeless. And you're telling me that we could solve homelessness in this country? Wow, that's revolutionary. And then you're telling me that if we institute this thing called democracy dollars, we can wash out that corporate money in Washington and give the power back to the people?
Yep.
Sign me up.
Yep.
It makes so much sense. And that's the problem. It's like, is the rest of America just idiots or what? It's because this dude makes too much sense.
I think that's it. And I'm glad what you also kind of said there, that it's circumstance. There are so many times that when certain people in this country look at individuals who have experienced poverty or who have experienced homelessness, they say, well, it's because of the actions that they took. No, sometimes people are a victim of circumstance. Things can happen that are beyond an individual's control and create realities that they themselves, didn't have a great deal of hand in creating. And the other thing is, when we look at something like, democracy dollars, and we look at, Andrew's tax plans, and we look at the $1,000 a month, and so many of the other programs that, I studied while doing Andrew Yang's chair, is that some of them were such big and radical ideas, some people just couldn't figure it out. And it's because they were overthinking it. It's like, listen, just imagine, what's going to happen. Because when you put $1,000 in my pocket, I know what I need to spend that on. If you have some government program, that program's telling me what I can or cannot spend it on, what I'm supposed to use it for. If I'm getting some sort of, government subsidy, maybe it's only going to help me out with food. Well, hey, what if my problem is that I got a heart condition, and I got medication that is costing me way too much money to get? Getting food is great, but if I don't get this particular medication, I could die. We look at the cost for people to, be able to get medicine to be able to deal with diabetes. They would say, hey, I'm taking that $1,000 a month to be able to handle my, diabetes medicine. And then that's going to leave me more money for food, or maybe I'm going to take some sort of online classes, or, do something with it that's going to help me further my situation in life.
It's crazy because I see, we had a guest on one time. Her name was Jacqueline Holman, and she's part of the Yang Gang. And like, she's a whiz with stocks, right? But the problem is she doesn't have any money to invest in stocks. She doesn't have the money to be able to put it in there, because when she does put it in there, then it has to come back out to pay for medication and stuff like that. $1,000 a month would go such a long way just to improve a person's natural condition. Like, we're all good at certain things, right? I freaking hate math. I'm no good at math. But you know what? I can tear down a house like nobody's business. I can demolition something like crazy. We all got our talents, but we're not allowed to use them because we've been forced into these financial boxes. Correct. We've been forced into these jobs where we have to go to work, because if we don't go to work, we're not going to have any money to pay the rent at the end of the month. And the rent man doesn't care whether you have money or not, because he'll just kick your ass out. Don't think you're going to get that deposit back, because it's done.
That's right.
These circumstances are just over and over and over and over again in America. And I find it so frustrating that the people who are in power somehow keep getting elected over and over and over again, and nothing ever changes, because we get forced into these two-party system boxes, and you have to demonize the other side, or you're not a good Republican, or you're not a good Democrat. Something's got to change.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looked at this kind of two-party system, and we're wondering, what really are you doing for the American people? And it's frustrating when you sit back and look at this. I think about, what you also mentioned, that, you're working a job just to be able to pay rent. Maybe you're somebody who then has to work 2-3 jobs to make sure that you can take care of yourself. But with that $1,000 a month, then you're able to do things like stay home and spend more time with your kids or your family. How does that help that family unit? How does that help that social unit? And I think, part of our problem that we have now in politics is that people feel like they always have to take the hard line against the others, that we can't work with the other party, that we can't work with other individuals. And you and I, from being in construction, know that's not how you get things built. That's not how you get things done. If I were to turn to somebody on a job site and say, hey, I'm a Bears fan and he's a Packers fan, so I'm not going to deal with that idiot. I'm not going to work with him. And that guy would say, well, he's a Bears fan and I'm a Packers fan. Him either. The foreman would come up to us and say, listen, both y'all idiots better get to work and get this thing built, or you're both going. And I think that's what we're kind of looking at right now, that fear and unwillingness to work across lines so that we can actually get something accomplished. Now, it has happened occasionally, but it definitely needs to happen more often, because they need to start remembering that they're working there for us, not for special interest groups, not for corporations, not for all these other people. If you are elected into office, you are there to work for the American people. And that means all of us, whether I happen to be a millionaire or whether I happen to be somebody who repairs sinks for a living or whatever. That should be your major consideration, that you're actually working for the American people and getting something done that's going to help us.
It should be, but that's what's so frustrating about it. It's not, because they think that once they're in power, then they can just do whatever the hell they want to, And nobody's ever going to hold them accountable because, look, fact of the matter is our dumbasses keep voting them in every single time. So why should I change?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why, one of the things that we're trying to do with New Frontier Action is making sure that we are taking a look at certain pieces of legislation, certain things that are actually going through and saying, look, this is how this is going to help people. And you better make sure that you vote for this, because we're going to let everybody know about this. When we talk about grassroots organizing, it's also letting people know, because I know that here in the state of Iowa, I went around and talked to a lot of different people, and sometimes they had no idea what was going on at our state house. And I thought, a great way for us to kind of affect that is to make sure we let people know, here's this bill, here's what it does, here's how it helps you, and make sure that we tell everybody about it. So if that particular individual doesn't vote for that bill that's actually going to help people, we're going to be able to turn to the people and say, look, this was actually going to help you. This person didn't vote for it. They need to go. They're not actually working for your interests, because this would have been something that helped you. And I think that that's what we need to do when it comes to, when we talk about like grassroots and stuff. Grassroots has got to be getting to know your neighbors, getting out and going and talking to people you might not normally talk to, getting in to know people and going to different spaces, and then finding out what are the issues that you all care about and can work on together. And then how do you make sure that you do that? How do you make sure you organize for that? Obviously, we all have to do a lot of things virtually now because of issues with COVID. But at the same point in time, we still have to be able to go out there and have those conversations. And this right here is a great way to do it. Make sure that you're getting out there and talking to people where they are.
For sure. And I wanted to go back to the Andrew Yang campaign for a second. How is it that what went wrong in Iowa?
Well, I think that, I don't know if I would say wrong, but I would say that, when it comes to different opportunities that we could have taken advantage of, certain ones were missed.
Are you starting to sound like a football coach over there? Going into that coach speak. Well, there was a lot of missed opportunities, and
So, just from a basic standpoint of being an Iowan, okay, I know that they would have loved to have seen Andrew more. There are certain places, we could have had him more often that I think would have helped us out a little bit more. Because when Andrew was at some place, his message resonated. People liked him. We packed, different places. So having Andrew Moore, definitely could have helped.
I don't know, brother, because I spent most of the time over here in New Hampshire covering the New Hampshire events, and he was here like freaking. There were so many events, and we packed them all out, like you're saying, the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it seemed like when it came to election day, it was just like, nope. It's like we like Andrew, but
Well, I think it was also the part of it was, when we were talking about that, Andrew had such big new ideas, and some people were when you talk about New Hampshire and Iowa, they're both kind of, I don't know if I want to say conservative, but they're not the risk takers out there. They're not the people that see something new and decide that's what I want to go for because that's the best thing for me. They're kind of like, I want to play it safe and quiet. And I think that had something to do with it. Honestly, like you said, when Andrew was here and he went to places, he was getting crowds. People loved him, the way he interacted with people. I remember standing there for hours at times after an event because Andrew would literally stay and say hi to every person after an event. No matter how many people was there, he was greeting everybody. So I think that was it. That and possibly just getting I guess more support from like mainstream media. But Andrew was great because he went on every news channel that would allow him on there. And I think that was another thing that really stood out about Andrew. All I can say is that this isn't the last time we're going to hear about Andrew. As far as I know, didn't he file his papers to run for mayor of New York?
Yeah, but that's frustrating in and of itself because I kind of feel like there's no upside to that position. because no matter what you do, no matter how much good you do, you're still going to piss half the people off. So, to me, there's no political advantage other than saying that you've held a public office, and then that also puts in the Andrew Yang 2024 run off till 2028. And, Al Jan brings up a wonderful point and says what went wrong was the DNC had already picked Biden from the start. And that's a fact. I came from the conservative side. And when you come from the conservative side, you already come in knowing that the DNC is corrupt as hell. But the problem is you get over here to the Democrat side and you realize, what, the Republicans ain't no better. They're corrupt as hell too. And I firmly believe that that's a fact, that the DNC had already picked who they wanted. And that's why that's why there was a blackout. That's why there was no media coverage. That's why they were told not to cover him. That's why they left him off of graphics. And they wanted to push the establishment bomb. And it's so frustrating because it's like, these are the choices that we're left with at the end of the day. And what's supposed to be the greatest country in the world, we're left with Joe freaking Biden, who you can get into all that history if you want to. And then you're left with Donald Trump, this crazy ass dude who's up there ranting and raving all the time. It's like, what in the world are we doing right now?
No, I mean, you're right. The job of whether you're talking about the Democrats or the Republicans, the only job of the party should be is how do I help get, candidates in front of people? How do I make sure that, people have a chance to see this candidate, to get to know them? It shouldn't be about, them making the determination of who the candidate should be. That should be left up to the people. That shouldn't be the party. The party's job is to provide the structure, so that people can meet the candidate as far as, organizing goes. It shouldn't be picking the candidate. And, I think with Andrew Yang, you're right. We did see, unfortunately, that there was that kind of prejudice against Andrew. And when I say that, I don't mean like, racial prejudice. I mean prejudice as a candidate. They had guy. And then
because
that was
that's just it. They don't want anybody to come in and wreck the establishment. And that's exactly what Andrew would have done. He would have wrecked the establishment on both sides, because you start getting support for things like democracy dollars and you telling me that my piggy bank's about to run dry. No, I'm in power. I don't want you to wreck my power, and I'll do everything that I can to keep my power. And that's kind of where we were at with it. And we had a question come in and to clarify about the 2024 run. When you run for mayor of New York, you have to sign this little piece of paper, to my understanding, that says you are not going to seek a higher office until your term is done. Now, people have gotten around that, and they've gotten to a point, Andrew could get to a point where he could say, well, I feel like, my country still needs me. My country's not where it's supposed to be. And they would say, okay, you can run for president. But he would look like a political opportunist if he did that. And he's not that type of person. He's going to run for mayor of New York City with the full intention of winning and serving out his term as mayor of New York City. Because at the end of the day, Andrew Yang just wants to help people. And that's kind of where we get into what we were talking about earlier. Who's going to be the next Andrew Yang?
Yeah, and I mean, Andrew Yang was a dynamic character, and he had a great message, and was as smart as any human being I've ever met in my entire life. And I think, like I said, it's us kind of looking through who else is trying to adopt Andrew's platform. What are they trying to do? How are they kind of trying to connect people? And do we feel we can trust this person? And I think at that standpoint, we can move in the right direction. But, I still, because I'm a fighter, I always believe, there's always the next fight to be done. That we can find somebody, we can support somebody, we can promote somebody. It's just that who can we go out there and recruit? Who can we get? Who can we organize folks behind? And as we've seen with, Andrew Yang's race, if you want to help out, you don't necessarily have to live in that state. Like, you went to New Hampshire. I had all sorts of people come here to the state of Iowa to help with the Andrew Yang campaign that were from all over the United States. Heck, we had one young lady working here on the Andrew Yang campaign that came from Norway just to help.
Mhm.
And so, that's what we look at when I say organizing. You can't just always rely on talking to the same people that you always do. Who else can you get involved? Who else can you connect with, that cares about the same issues that you do? And how do you make that a reality?
Right. And something, but I kind of think if Donald Trump taught us anything, right, it's that a populist could win, right? He was going to come in when he ran against Hillary. He was going to come in and do what Andrew Yang could have done, and that was wreck the establishment, right? That was his message. I'm going to come in. I'm going to wreck the establishment. I don't care if you're on the Republican side. I don't care if you're on the Democrat side. I'm going to drain the swamp. You know that the fake news media is out there. We see how they try to control the narrative depending on what they want to push out there. So we know that's fake. So this guy's going to come in. He's going to try to wreck the establishment. And it was a popular message, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I really believe even if he hadn't run as a Republican, I feel like he would have won because his message resonated with a lot of people, poor people in general.
Right.
All the jobs are gone. We see the jobs are gone. We just didn't know that the jobs were gone because of automation, because it's kind of a slow fade. It just creeps in and you don't realize it. And then all of a sudden you're surrounded by it. Donald Trump talking about bringing back the jobs. Well, guess what? Where I grew up in Ohio, all the factories closed down. And once the factories closed down, the cities are it's like just a cesspool. It just sucks the life out of the city. There's no industry. There's no opportunity. The crime gets high. So he comes in with this message and he's like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. This is why I think Andrew Yang should run as a third party, because I think there's no better time to get that message out there. We're all connected now. We all have the internet. And if you can control the internet, you can win the election.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that has happened during this particular, pandemic is so many of us are able to connect and communicate all across the country. We've adjusted our lives to be able to get together on things like Zoom or Google Meets or Teams or podcasts or things like that. And so that has kind of taught us that, we have the capability to organize nationwide without your typical mainstream media, without your typical ways of doing that by getting on certain news broadcasts. I've seen people who are on TikTok who have, close to 500,000 followers, and just imagine if you're a candidate who's savvy enough to be able to use the different social media platforms, how we can do that. I've had meetings with people from all over the United States just because, I've started to understand Zoom and, what to do with it and how we can use it. And it's amazing the type of things you can do in that fashion. So, yeah, I mean, whatever Andrew decides to do with his future, I think for myself personally, he's doing it because he thinks that's what's best. That's what he thinks is going to help people the most. But we hopefully will have more people, as time goes on, understand his message, run on that message, and realize, that's something that's going to be important for people. I know that there was a candidate, I think, for Senate in Kentucky who also was running on the freedom dividend. Unfortunately, he didn't win, but, he got a larger share of the vote than anybody could have ever predicted.
Mike Breuer.
Yeah, Breuer, exactly. And I think
we had him on the show. He's an awesome dude, and he here again has the same kind of heart that Andrew has. It's up to us.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the candidate can work real hard. They can do a lot. I can't say that Andrew didn't work his heart out for that campaign. But, we got to make sure that there's a lot of other people that we, get off the bench and get in the game and start helping out. It's like they say, many hands make light the work, and that from working in construction like I did, when everybody pitches in, a certain project becomes much easier. And I think that's it. There's still some people who are like, I don't know, I'm not sure. For some people, I know for me and for others, sometimes politics is a dirty word. would rather have, I'll say, F you than join politics. But
For sure.
like, sometimes we got to be like, listen, we're talking about your life, man. We're not just talking about a bunch of dusty old people arguing in some closed room. We're talking about your life, your ability to take care of you and your family, your ability for your family to have an equal shot in this country. And so we need you to step up. We need you to come out, and we need you to be a part of this. Because if you don't, then you're going to be in the same situation that you were before, with two unacceptable choices. I mean, when we came to 2016, at one point in time, I was interested in 2016. When I asked people who they were going to vote for, they said, well, either Bernie or Trump. And isn't it interesting that the two candidates during that election that were really looking to kind of tear down the establishment, people were deciding between them and not between, just one party and the other. It was the people who were really going to attack the establishment and do something different. And I think that's what we need to look at as we go forward. Like I said, how do we organize around that and find that candidate that we can trust and we can get behind?
Well, I think that's just it. I think that's where a lot of the political disengagement comes from, and why people do consider politics such a dirty word, because it seems like no matter who we vote in, we take turns voting them in, Republican and Democrat, and yet nothing ever changes. Nothing's ever done, and stuff just keeps getting worse. None of these politicians have ever directly affected my life except in a negative way. And how do we fix that? And the only way to fix it is to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then the other thing is we got to hold these individuals accountable. When they do something that is against our interest and what's good for the people, then we got to be able to stand up and say, look what this person just did right here. We got to point that out to people. I think sometimes what is frustrating for me after working on several different campaigns is that a lot of times after somebody gets elected, people are like, whew, that was hard. Now let's go sit down. I'm like, no, you put this person in office now, and you got certain issues that you care about. Sorry, I'm hanging on my table there, so it's making my camera shake. You person in office, you got certain issues that you care about. You got to make sure you go back to them and say, you better make sure that you take care of this issue. That's what we're doing with, New Frontier Action, is making sure that we go back to individuals and say, listen, here's the issues that we care about and that this community cares about. I've got 1,500 signatures on this piece of paper that says people care about this issue. And if you don't take care of it, then all those 1,500 people are going to be voting in an opposite way when it comes to re-election time. Those are the two things that I know that candidates are most afraid of, is votes and money. And if you can show them that, you were voting against the concerns or interests of 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people, that's going to wake them up and hopefully put them on the path to be doing the right thing. Now, does that always work? No, but, it's better to try. It kind of reminds me of something one of my old speech teachers used to say to me, was that, it's always better to aim for the stars and miss than shoot for the pile of crap and hit. And I think sometimes, we've been shooting for that pile and we've been hitting it too often. So, like I said, I'm a fighter. I'm willing to get back in there and see what I can do about this game. See if we can actually, get some of the concerns that we want addressed to get those addressed. But I got to hop off here pretty soon. I'm going to be actually getting on the phone with some state legislators here in the state of Iowa to kind of talk to them.
Breaking news. Tell us about it. All right.
Well, basically, it's kind of to discuss some of the things that we were talking about. When we talk about things like, people have an equal chance at education, making sure that we have funding going out to different schools, and not always that funding being funneled actually towards schools that already have plenty of money, and wealthy, tax bases. If you look at where I live in West Des Moines, it's a real nice community. There's a lot of tax base here, but there are other, smaller areas that aren't getting that. We got to work on that. We got to work on things like allowing for better access to healthcare. Unfortunately, in the state of Iowa, when we talk about some of our rural spaces, certain hospitals and medical facilities have shut down. So now if somebody's got a medical problem, they got to drive, 1, 2, maybe 3 hours to be able to get to a medical facility that's going to help them. And that's unacceptable. So it's talking to people about, what issues they're going to be proposing this year, how we plan to support them, and, how we plan to make sure that, other people know about this. Because for me, it's important that, people actually understand what's being going on at the State House and that they, support or oppose certain pieces of legislation on the street. Because then when it comes to election time, we can say, look, this person voted for it. This person voted against it. This is how that could affect your life. So what are you going to do when you get to the ballot box?
Absolutely. Brother, I want to thank you for being on here. I want you to give out your information. If anybody can, is there a way that people can support you or support your organization?
Yeah, so it's New Frontier Action Fund. You can find us on our website, or you can find us on Facebook. We always need donations to keep up the fight. Because we're looking at going in there and fighting, like I said, for your average everyday individual. Too many large corporations have got, millions of dollars they can spend on lobbyists. We're lobbying for our other fellow Americans. That's what we're there fighting for. So look us up at New Frontier Action Fund, on Facebook or our website, or just contact me through Facebook, Al Womble. You'll be able to see me. There's a picture of me, sitting there right with Andrew Yang. And Russell, I think you've seen it, haven't you?
Yes, it's Al Womble, Womble, correct?
Yep. Look me up. We're in there trying to make the good fight happen. Unfortunately, that does, we do need funds to keep that up. But that's why I'm going to be meeting with these state legislators right now, so that we can, make sure that we're talking about the issues that are, most important to your average working people out there. That's
for sure.
About.
Brother, thank you so much for being on here. Maybe here pretty soon we can get a part 2 in, because I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You are a very down-to-earth person, and we need you definitely fighting for this cause. So we appreciate it so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Russell. Contact me anytime. Anybody out there who's watching or listening, look me up, and be happy to talk with anybody anytime, except when there's a Chicago Bears game on. That's my time.
I'm the same way with the Carolina Panthers, but we don't have to worry about that no more.
I hear you, brother. All right. Well, hey, have a good day. Thanks for having me on, and let's stay in touch, man.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.
There you have it, Yang Gang. If you want to support a great cause, we'll make sure to link that in the description. One thing that never ceases to amaze me is that it doesn't matter who we have on this show, on a Broke Folk Vote podcast. It doesn't matter. It's like the conversation is always awesome. It's always good. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on. Doesn't matter, because most of us are all right here just in the middle. Most of us aren't on the extremes. Most of us just want to see our family and our friends do a little bit better. And I hope that, we win this election in Georgia, because if they do win the election in Georgia, the Democrats do win the election in Georgia. So weird that I'm pulling for Democrats to win. But if they win, then I think that you're going to see a lot more help coming out of the White House in the coming months. And I know that that's something that is desperately needed. And I know that Andrew Yang is going to continue fighting for that. Yang Gang, we love you. See you on the next one. Peace out. Go check out Little Yang Gang's channel, Kitty in the Water. He's got a gaming channel now. So proud.